And we are back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Media Network, on the Go Local Live Broadcasting Center here at 90 Way Boston Street in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. The naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. It's a Thanksgiving Day weekend. And one of the things that I am most thankful in the last year or two is a number of the groups that I've managed to become friends with, become more than acquaintances, and at least at some peripheral level have been able to try and help promote and try and support. No group represents that more on a personal and emotional level than the folks of Burrillville, Rhode Island. To whatever small degree that we've been able to participate in the process, fighting against the proposed power plant in Burrillville, just want to say this, I am extraordinarily grateful. The ability to work with folks in this program quite simply makes me better. And I am proud that you'll allow me to come along for the ride. Someone who is now officially a repeat offender on the show is joining me for this hour. Of course, if you watched the show before, you know him. If not, here's your chance to meet, I believe, one of the most intriguing candidates for the governorship of the great state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. He, of course, is Paul Roselli. He is the president of the Burrillville Land Trust, someone intimately involved in the fight against the Invenergy program, who's decided to really take it to the next level and go directly after the source of power. Now, my word's not his. I'll call it Mordor. I'll call it Halitosis Hall. I'll engage in whatever insulting, deprecating, highly personal, challenging, abusive rhetoric whatsoever. He's a gentleman, though, and he's an adult. So, Paul, welcome back to the Coalition.
Thank you. It's always good to be back here with you in all that you do, and we're so proud to have you not only on our side, whatever that means, but also have you in our support for a variety of things, not just this power plant, this fracked gas power plant in the middle of the woods. So.
All right, we, as we like to say, what do we say? We are Burrillville. We are all Burrillville,
Yeah.
and to the degree that Rhode Islanders have followed the continuing, both the travails, but also the strength and the courage of the people in Burrillville, I think we've all come to realize that whatever challenges, whether it be life or our government or forces that would appear to be larger than us, confront us with, I think we can continue in this, particularly in this holiday season when we reflect on these things, take courage and example from what you folks continue to accomplish up there.
Sure.
It's just very, very important.
Yeah.
In a week or two, or I'd say the last 2 weeks, when we found out that as a state, we are the leader in poverty in New England, and then when we find out that our third grade reading scores are amongst the worst in the nation, and as I mentioned, you'll hear me say all the time, third grade reading scores are a primary indicator of future potential academically. When we face those things and then we look at your example and what you guys are doing up there, we can fix anything if we just put our minds to it.
I think we can, and the one encouraging thing that you've been a part of, and all the folks who are listening, and all the folks not only in Burrillville but in the rest of the state, we've done this together. We've done this listening to a variety of stakeholders, not just the folks who are opposed to certain things, but also listen to stakeholders who are proponents of futuristic jobs, not the jobs of the past, proponents of a fossil-free environment where electricity doesn't have to be produced by fossil fuels anymore, how a political structure can, if there's leadership at the top or at any level sometimes, how we can dramatically change things. And that's what we've learned. We've taken this issue from a backyard issue, and that's what it was. Let's be honest here. It was a backyard issue. Don't put it here. I live across the street. It's right down the road. We've taken that. We've made it not only a statewide issue, a regional issue, and in very, very many circles, and one we're going to talk about tonight, an international issue as well. Mm-hmm. And that's dramatic. That's a dramatic turnaround from what we've seen. We have to remember that this thing is over 2 years old now. This all started way back in August of 2015 when our governor went to the Providence Chamber of Commerce to officially declare out loud and in person that she would do anything she could to make sure Invenergy was successful here in our state. And since that time, our governor has received checks from Invenergy for her campaign, traveled to Chicago to schmooze and booze with other folks giving her funds for her campaign. And now, in the past 2 weeks, there have been a dramatic shift. There's been some dramatic information about the power plant. So yeah, it's been a struggle, but one worthy of doing, and that's what I want to emphasize tonight. And we're going to talk about two areas that I hope we talk about.
Absolutely.
that are absolutely worthy of our knowledge, of our gaining information about these issues and taking action. They are absolutely, because they're going to affect us not only for the next few years, but way down the road in terms of jobs, job creation, the type of jobs that we're looking for in the future, and also our health, our safety, and the environment. And we'll talk about those as we go on today. But yeah, it's been a dramatic couple of weeks.
Well, now, okay, so let's set the stage. I think we want to talk about the ISO situation first.
Sure.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah.
What now, folks, to refresh,
Yeah.
last year there were, earlier the year there were ISO auctions and feel free to jump in because
Yeah,
it's a tortured landscape here. There are ISO auctions, and we all hear about ISO every summer.
Sure.
When, in the past, when, it's interesting because we didn't hear about it last summer, but in the summer, I don't know, something about alternative energy bumping up.
Something, yeah, bumping
something
up,
like that. Bubbling up, if you will. But ISO New England essentially acts as sort of a distribution format to guarantee a steady supply of electrical power and utilities
That's
to
right.
the rest of New England. They hold periodic auctions that are forward-looking and attempt to gauge both supply and demand to kind of create a steady marketplace for both the delivery and the acceptance, if you will, the
That's right.
purchase of power. So what happened, and
Sure.
what's the spin now out of
Sure.
Invenergy?
Sure. Well,
Invenergy?
it's interesting. So let's set the stage here a little bit, and thank goodness we have a little bit of time to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to many years ago when ISO New England was created. The idea, the format, the premise of creating it, it was a reasonable thought that you get an organization together that manages electricity in a certain area, manages the supply, manages the pricing, helps to manage the distribution.
Mm-hmm.
They're not concerned with the wires or how to get the electricity from point A to point B, but they are concerned with making sure the lights stay on. That's the premise. And their overall mission, even way back when it was created in the 1990s, was that they would remain neutral. And in essence, what that means was they really don't care. And even the current CEO of ISO New England says emphatically, we don't care who the suppliers are. We don't care where the energy comes from. We don't care, we don't care, we don't care. All we do care about is making sure the lights stay on, it's affordable, it's reasonable, and it's consistent. That's all we care about, and we will remain neutral throughout this whole process.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the premise of this. And we're not alone in New England. There are ISOs, there are independent service operators all across the nation. One in New York, many down south, Midwest, out west. We have one in this region called ISO New England,
Mm-hmm.
Independent Service Operator, New England. Last Friday, a week ago today, some of us heard about this meeting with the current CEO of New England. His name is Gordon Van Willy. And Mr. Willie is the CEO of ISO New England. He's the guy, he's the boss, he's the figurehead, he's the face. He's the guy who comes out and sets the stage for a variety of things. Helps to calm everybody's nerves down about how the supply is going to get to a certain region and what the prices are and all of that. And again, remember, ISO New England is supposed to remain neutral. Mr. Van Willy was invited to a oil industry breakfast.
Do they have sticky buns?
I don't know. I wasn't invited. I wish.
I wasn't either.
There were 5 of us who went there just to see what was going on. Mr. Van Willy was there, along with a few industry leaders in the oil and gas industry, a few labor unions, and a few of the broadcast media, the Providence Journal, the Associated Press, and NPR, the local NPR.
How about Jerry Elmer? Was he invited?
Conservation Law Foundation was not invited.
Not invited, yeah.
Some of the other more, let's say, in opposition to fossil fuels, were not invited as well. And here's what happened. At least here's what we think happened, and we only know this through some of the news reports that came out of that breakfast meeting. Was that Mr. Van Willy stated emphatically that we're going to be here for the next, that gas is going to be with us for decades to come. That folks, especially in National Grid and a few others, should stop building more pipelines. We need more gas. Along with more natural gas, more methane, what the result will be more power plants. Because as the supply grows, you've got to do something with it. And if there's more supply of anything, you tend to use it. And in this case, what Mr. Van Willy was saying was that the New England should expect that we will be here for the next 40 years or so, many decades to come, when it comes to using natural gas, methane gas, to power our electricity production facilities. He also went on to say that solar and wind would not make a substantial impact in the region for many decades to come. However, he did say in the same breath that over the last few years that solar and wind have contributed, and listen to this number now, over 2,000 megawatts, that's 2 gigawatts of electricity in the New England region. 2 gigawatts. And for those of you who remember, and you remember, our proposed power plant in the middle of the woods up in northwest corner of Rhode Island is a gigawatt. So far, we've eliminated that power plant just from solar and wind.
Right.
We've eliminated one more as well, according to Mr. Van Willy. So here we have the CEO who is supposed to remain neutral, not supposed to get involved with any particular organization, states over and over again, we don't care where the electricity comes from. Goes to an oil industry and gas industry meeting in Cranston and states, for the record, that gas will be with us a long time. We should expect it. Go build more pipelines. Solar and wind will not meet our needs in the foreseeable future.
First of all, when you use the term foreseeable future, when folks in that position speak, there's a political implication to what they say, there's a moral implication to what they say, there's quite frankly a business implication to what they say, and there's an impact on the markets, what they say.
Absolutely, and we shouldn't discount any of those.
Right.
He was there for a particular reason, and we can assume that it was just to give an update on what's going on in the industry. In many of our minds, and a few of the industry leaders who listened to this conversation, again, it was all on some websites, a little portion of his speech, and some of his quotes were quoted in were written in some of the articles on both online and newspapers. He was there for a particular reason. That was to give credence to and give vitality to a dying industry. It's a dying industry, both in use, abuse, and how it affects our planet.
If folks who follow tech understand something called Moore's Law, and Moore's Law Mr. Moore was one of the original founders of Intel Corporation, and when he talks about the exponential increase in microprocessor power, many people describe Moore's Law also to the exponential increase of battery storage capacities. And traditionally, that was always the bugaboo, if you will, family show, that was cited by folks who were involved in alternative, or I should say, involved in maintaining the status quo and trying to marginalize alternative energy as being the obstacle, the unstoppable burden, the benchmark for the success of solar and alternative energy. And yet, as we see both in the computer industry and storage, and we see now in batteries, man's ability to develop products like that broadly and quickly is unchallenged. So you've got this situation where battery power is growing exponentially to a point where if someone, and this is my words, not yours,
Sure,
I'll say this,
sure.
if someone is in a position of business leadership, and clearly ISO is supposed to maintain, my understanding, a level of independence. What I mean by independence, a CPA, for example, is independent of a particular company and evaluating them.
That's what the I means of ISO, Independent Service Operators. So it says it right in their name.
He's got a fiduciary responsibility to the industry at large to focus merely on, as you point out, stable supply, not on the political or the business underpinnings of that. And for anyone to think that they can be predictive of what's going to happen as technology continues to explode at an exponential pace, that's ludicrous.
And you know, I mean, he's a very experienced man. If you look at his resume, he's well versed in just about any type of fuel source around, any type of electricity and heating type of industry. He's not challenged when it comes to his expertise, but as a leader and a prognosticator, a predictor of what the future may hold, I think he's purely wrong. And as you say, in battery storage and some of the other innovations that have gone on in the last 4 or 5 years or so.
Well, think of infrared solar. I mean,
Sure.
you know, that's just one burgeoning area. I mean, the notion that there are, as we sit here on the darkest of nights here in the city we love, Providence, that there is a capacity to produce energy regardless of the time of day.
Sure.
That's just one area that's got the potential to literally explode. We're just a few iterations away from solar power essentially being on the level of demand that, and I don't think I'm being overly optimistic or Pollyannish here. Solar power on demand is really not generations away. I think it's a matter of a handful of years.
Yeah, when Elon Musk was here, and it's an interesting, so we've got this leader of ISO New England who states certain things about his industry. We've got someone else like Elon Musk who came here and states certain predictors and certain statements of fact when it comes to what's happening today. In his case, a whole bunch of fields. You've got those two people, actually leaders in the industry, experts in a whole bunch of fields, clashing with their opinions. Who do you believe? Who do you want to believe? Right. The short answer is I'm not quite sure whether or not I'm an industry specialist or an expert or somebody believes that power plants are perfect, whether they be produced by solar, wind, or fossil fuels. I'm not that expert. However, I do know this. Over the last 5 years, solar has taken off. Wind is about to take off even more dramatically. According to Mr. Van Weel, we've replaced 2 power plants since New England, the solar industry has mushroomed in New England over those last 2 or 3 years. And that's all it's been. It's also created something that he never talked about, and that's an economic windfall for those states that are supporting this stuff, supporting wind, supporting solar, not only in terms of jobs, but Rhode Island, for example, sends out $3 billion when it comes to fuel. In other words, we don't create any fuels in our own region, in our own state. So that means whenever we go to the gas pump or turn on that electricity, that switch in our home, the electricity that comes, the power, the fuel that comes into a power plant to produce that electricity and heat or light our homes comes from somewhere else. The money we pay on that bill goes out of state. For solar and wind, and Elon Musk talks about this dramatically, the number of jobs has increased, is better than and more sustaining and more sustainable than than what Mr. Van Wheely's talking about in terms of building pipelines and more infrastructure. There's also more jobs that have been created quickly. Remember, a solar panel comes into a state, gets on a truck, gets delivered to a home, gets put on a roof. Somebody has to do that. Power plant takes 2 to 3 years to build, or more. And before it comes online, there's a bunch of regulatory issues. Here we are, 2 years later, since August 1st of 2015, when our governor said we'll do everything we can to make sure you're successful. She forgot that the rest of us have to be successful too. So Elon Musk is talking about the here and now, and Mr. Van Wheely's talking about the past.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we objected to. Of all the things we objected to, of his presence, who knows why that occurred. Breakfast, I don't know if they were having sticky buns or not.
Love sticky buns.
Sorry. We brought you a sweet potato pie. So you can have that. But not to be coy or make light of all this, because this is really serious. It's a lot easier for a solar panel to get up there and jobs to be created. It takes an enormous amount of money, an enormous amount of time, and in the end, we're still paying for somebody else's fuel. You mentioned earlier that Rhode Island is one of the poorest, if not one of the poorest, according to certain rankings in the nation. One of the reasons is we take a lot of our money and do other things with it, both as individuals and as a state. It goes out of the state. If more money was put into our local businesses, our local economy, local folks doing local jobs for local people, that money would stay right here. In Mr. Van Wheely's terms, that money can go to the billionaires to make them even more billionaires.
Right.
I'm not quite sure if that makes sense, but you get the idea.
Absolutely. We talk often with regard to the Pawsox situation, we talk about local economies. And when we talk about local economies don't observe geographic boundaries, but you could roughly say that our local economy here is essentially just north of the Rhode Island border, out to little portions of eastern Connecticut, and out to the South Shore to New Bedford, and maybe just a little bit down into Connecticut. So the degree in which capital flight takes place is critical. And when I talk about capital flight, there are so many different ways it can happen. You could hypothetically give a monopoly to a company that's moving its operations gradually out of state for casinos. Hypothetically. Oh, that's right, that's what we do. So hundreds of millions of dollars are bet every year in a casino, which is guaranteed to lose money for the players. And that money is being reinvested in casinos outside the nation. We could build a sports stadium whose participants, the large majority ongoing operating salaries, post-construction, go to people who live out of state, and we can continue to export money that way. And to your example, we can continue, and this, by the way, this is what's fascinating, because a lot of the same, I don't want to use the word conservative, a lot of the same neocons, the same sort of big business, subsidy mentality, for years talked about, not wanting to subsidize local business, but at the same time, if you're taking that money and or subsidize, for example, energy from across the ocean, from the Middle East. They all talked about that, but at the same time, we're doing the same thing, except our money is going to companies based, in this case, in Chicago, or elsewhere outside of the region. We are a net exporter of funds, and we are doing precious little to bring money from the rest of the country here.
And here's an opportunity, and no one can predict the future, but in this case, I think we can look at, it's just like getting a stock portfolio, and they always say past performance is no predictor of future performance. In this case, I think we can be assured that the future is bright for solar, the future is bright for alternative types of energy sources, the future is bright for bringing those economies back into the state, and taking that $3 billion, as a percentage of what we pay for other outside services, as you mentioned. That's huge. That's huge. That means that, do the math. 1 million people divided. There's a lot of money there. There's a lot of money that can stay in the state. and for someone like Mr. Van Weel Mr. Van Willy to suggest that we're going to be saddled with gas infrastructure and other types of fossil fuel infrastructure for the foreseeable future, for many decades to come, is abhorrent. It doesn't make any sense in terms of what the science should say we end up doing, and is not what most people are looking at in terms of actual predictions for a year down the road. 2017 will be better than 2016. That's what OER, Rhode Island Office of Energy Resources, says in terms of job growth, in terms of solar energy use and installation, and the amount of money that we save in our state instead of the money going outside, staying in our state. That's 2017, which is just about over. The predictions for 2018, between those 2 years, 2017 and 2018, there should be enough solar installations according to what all of these other agencies, both in Rhode Island, elsewhere in New England, predict based on statistical analysis of past data, current data, and future data, that we will displace another 1 to 2 power plants. So in the course of Mr. Van Wheely's comments, and if we get to 2018, we will have displaced 4 1 gigawatt power plants just from alternative energy sources.
Right, and so really the goal should be to make Rhode Island energy independent.
That the goal should be for ISO New England CEO to come onto a public stage in front of oil producers and oil industry folks and say, your future is not that bright. It's time to change. If he really truly wanted to be a leader, and I don't think he was a leader in this point, but if he truly wanted to be a leader in this type of industry, stop talking about the actual numbers that are out there, the number of jobs, the number of people who are working in the industry. And I'm going to tell you a little story, and I'm going to share it with the rest of you. As of about a week ago, I've started to heat my home, and I know this is going to sound funny, but I've started to heat my home with 90% vegetable oil.
Okay, no,
Yeah. So I know that sounds kind of strange.
well, I should let me jump in.
Yeah.
You know, in the year 2005, 2006, you know, my day job, I work in with trucks. We started to see with trucks the use of frying oil, vegetable oil. We saw diesel modifications taking place where people could use recycled cooking oils.
Recycled fryolate oil.
Right,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
At the time, your truck would be give you the wafting odors of Szechuan cooking all the time.
Well, they do deodorize it. So
Right, but now we've come
But
a
it's-
lot further, thank God. But
But
that's
it's
wonderful.
But it's an indicator. It's an indicator where the industry is going. Prices are the same. The economy is skewed towards the local economy rather than sending monies out to Texas, Western Pennsylvania, and other oil producers, both in this state and other parts of the world. So I think Mr. Van Wheely's wrong here. I really do. I think that he can be challenged to do one of two things when he comes on public stages like that: give in or think anew. And in this case, he gave in.
Well, and again, you continue to take the high road. You're emotionally mature, and you discuss facts. Here's my problem with any type of situation like that. You've got an organization that is extra-governmental, or in the words of Rhode Island, they're quasi-governmental. They have a regulatory, process in place that they participate in, and they exist because of. And anytime any one of the new economy tools comes along where all of a sudden you take away from a bureaucracy and you move, and I'll use Uber or Lyft as an example of that, ride sharing, or Airbnb, any one of the new sharing products that is a disruptor, as they
Sure,
say in the
sure.
biz, you weaken the hold for, and these are my words, not yours, they weaken the hold of some very powerful people on highly established, mature parts of our economy. And they disrupt, everything. And clearly, the beauty of alternative energy is it's distributive in nature. What I mean by that is you're less beholden to large bureaucracies, large industrial scale distribution techniques, and as a result, you're displacing established parts of the economy in exchange for market disruptors that are highly efficient.
Sure.
And in doing so, you ruffle some feathers and you cost a few people.
Yeah.
Let's be blunt. I mean, ISO isn't doing this. This is not a charitable organization. The UN humanitarian folks aren't, in blue helmets, aren't supporting ISO. And, the Catholic Church or the Ladies of the Poor, Blessed Mothers of the Poor, aren't supporting ISO. There's money at stake. And quite frankly, the status quo is a lot more financially comfortable for a lot of people than the potential for yet another economy, another factor of the economy to be disrupted.
Yeah, change is difficult. Change at any level is difficult, personal level, organizational level, and industry level. In this case, change has to happen. We don't have a choice.
And by the way, it will happen, regardless of what we attempt to do.
That's true.
We talk about in mythology the notion of a king standing up to the waves and saying, "No, stop. Here, stop. You're going to the tides." And he did it to illustrate the fact that no individual has that type of power, and the market ultimately, market innovation, in this case in the form of more sophisticated solar panels, more sophisticated energy collection, more sophisticated energy storage, will win. It will happen regardless of the best efforts of those entrenched powers to stymie it. Sorry, folks, that's just how the movie ends.
And that's true. And I think we're coming full circle here. But the folks in Burrillville have, and elsewhere in Rhode Island, not just the folks in Burrillville, but the folks all throughout Rhode Island recognize that change has to occur. That's going to occur regardless of somebody either getting in the way or getting out of the way. That's just going to happen anyway. So they have become the default leaders, and many of those folks have taken on roles that you would normally attribute to people like Van Willie and state leaders, and one of the reasons I got into running for governor of the state of Rhode Island was that it's time. This is not a stump speech or anything, but it's time to make that change. It really is. We need a bold new vision for this state. We can't look at these statistics anymore that come out of national bureaus and saying Rhode Island is 39 out of 50 states or #1 in poverty levels or whatever. We can't do this anymore. So the old ways aren't working. The old industry, whether it be fossil fuel and some other agencies, just not working. So we need dramatic shift in how we're thinking. And Mr. Van Wheelie, if you believe him or if you get Elon Musk, let them go head to head. And I think what we're looking at is a bold new vision for this state and this region. And we got to start now. We have to discount folks like Mr. Van Wheelie. We just have to. Mm-hmm. He's an industry guy. He does a very good job of managing a distribution center, with the ability to keep the lights on, make sure that it's affordable. He does an excellent job of that. He's done that for a number of years. He will continue to do that for a number of years. And remember, just what he said both in this presentation in Cranston last Friday and other presentations. He doesn't care where the energy comes from. So let's hold his feet to the fire then. If that's what he feels, if that's exactly how he feels, if he doesn't care, then let's build anew. Let's build something different.
Yeah, it's time to move past the entrenched bureaucracies and the entrenched perspectives, whether it be education or power. It seems like that the establishment government has got this self-inflicted paralysis through analysis where they will continue to study the implications of positive change, whether it be through power, education, any one of a number of issues facing our state, and rather than embrace them in finding ways to enhance them. And again, it's what they said all those years ago, it's the vision thing. And when that vision thing is directly opposed to the personal interests of a large number of establishment folks here in the state, they're going to hold off as long as possible until that vision becomes a reality, and quite frankly, it overwhelms them. the sad part about all of this, whether it be the power plant in Burrillville, our educational system, the high level of poverty, is that we continue to lose generation after generation the quality of life, their potential, and the potential they could bring back to the community in exchange. We continue to lose that. We've already lost a few generations because of our failed school systems, because of our failed attempts, I use that word kindly, at economic development.
Sure.
We've let them all go, and we have to confront. There's a tendency for folks of my age to diminish the millennials, but the millennials, if you will, who, by the way, I find to be incredible young people with incredible potential, a lot of it being realized, so I won't dismiss them, but if they have shortcomings, that's a direct function of how we raised them as parents, but also the issues that we failed on so miserably as a community and as a state. What's the old line? I've seen the enemy and he is us. There's an aspect of that. I have to take a quick break and
Sure.
engage in a shameless plug for one of the folks who support the show. Of course, I'm talking about Air Sciences. airsciences.net, improving the health of your indoor environment throughout Rhode Island and Massachusetts. Mold remediation, biohazards, folks who might be suffering from immune issues. These are all aspects that airsciences.net can improve the quality of your life. Again, as we always say, folks, indie media is not for the faint of heart, and those local businesses that would choose to support it need your support. Without the indie media, whether it be any one of a number of websites, from Motif to RI Free Radio to RI Future to Steve Alquist's new effort to the Coalition, we all rely on individual support. So please, take a moment, airsciences.net, again, improving the health of your indoor environment. Joining us, if you're just jumping in right now on Facebook Live or on the golocalprov.com website, joining me in studio is Paul Roselli, well known to Coalition listeners, a repeat offender, if you will. We spent the first half hour or so talking about the issues surrounding ISO New England, and to me, what had, up until this moment, had been seen as a largely bureaucratic function would appear to be stepping over that line, and my words again, engaging in a form of philosophical and moral support, if I can use that word with the power plants. I'll use that loosely, but of the status quo for the energy structure, the old school of energy, and in doing so, I believe, corrupting the reputation and also corrupting the process, getting in the way of free market forces that are seeking at their own level, at their own speed, at their own pace, regardless of what we or can try to do to get in their way, as if we wanted to, proceeding at an exponential pace and ultimately cannibalizing the now declining conventional power energy. Sure. Now, there was also a movement this week, I guess the first meeting was this week, of a review of what's called the EFSB, the Energy Facility Siting Board. Again, my words, not Mr. Roselli's, but the much loathed Energy Facility Siting Board. As a libertarian, I have real issues with taking away from communities without representation the right to interpret or self-govern or self-rule. The Energy Facility Siting Board is comprised of 3 individuals appointed by the governor, the same governor who has actively donated money to Invenergy. Not even pretend, not even hiding it, but actively written checks, accepted checks, I should say, from Invenergy, and then pretending as if there could be possibly no conflict of interest because we're just supposed to believe she's swell. Yeah, okay, about that. In many other places, there would be more than an ethical problem with a governor accepting cash donations from a company who is involved in an extra legal process in order to qualify to do business under the appointment of people by that very same governor. There are a lot of places that would be a real problem. Not here, seemingly in Rhode Island, where it seems to happen unabated. So the speaker, as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong in the process,
Sure.
Speaker Mattiello decided to, in the wake of some legislation sponsored by Mr. Keeble, who is a representative to the Burrillville area, also the chairman of the House Judiciary, and from my familiarity, all in all, a pretty swell guy. In response to that, a board was appointed with stakeholders, and the stakeholders really comprise actually, I think, a pretty fair cross-section of folks. There are folks like yourself, thought leaders in the environmental movement. There are folks from the energy business, one of whom has actually spent time here on this show. And there are folks from the trade industries. You guys met for the first time, so it's a review with a review board.
Sure.
How did the meeting go? What's the process going to be?
Sure.
I know they've talked about a report deadline by the end of January. I believe Mr. Keeble, please correct me if I'm wrong, is looking to extend that a little bit so that the report can be thoughtful and thorough. But how did it go down the first time, and how's it looking?
Sure. So a little bit of background. The Energy Facility Siting Board, the way it exists now, was created way back in 1986. It was created for a few reasons that at the time were very obvious. There were a lot of state agencies doing pretty much the same thing when it came to siting and permitting power plants or large-scale wire projects or connection projects or substations or compressor stations. And all of these different organizations, state agencies, locals, nonprofits, federal agencies, are all banging heads pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was no coordination of those efforts. So they may have, some of these state agencies may have had the same wetlands bill or the same wetlands permitting authority, but they were conflicting with either different regulations and different this, different that. So along came a policy, to change all that. And this Energy Facility Siting Board was created way back in 1986. Fast forward to a few years ago, and the Energy Facility Siting Board was given the task of siting and permitting this frac gas power plant, a 1 gigawatt, 1,000 megawatts. That's 1 billion watts. And if anybody can do kilowatts, please write me or something as to how to get to kilowatts. But it's a lot of energy. Pretty much produced with methane gas, fracked gas from Western Pennsylvania. They came to Rhode Island proposing to put it somewhere just north of Pulaski Park, just south of Buck Hill, in an area where on any given year about 100,000 people from all over the region and we found out recently all over the world come to visit because of the clean air, the pristine landscape, the hiking, the boating, the fishing, bring the kids out to build a campfire, especially folks from Rhode Island who want to get away for 1 or 2 days, a weekend. Beautiful area, just what you would expect in northern New England or southern New England, the northern reaches of Rhode Island. So they were tasked with this issue, and along the way, a fault line was developed. And this fault line started to crack. There were issues about an overabundance of information. When we first started this process 2 years ago, it was about 500 pages of information. That means the applicant, Invenergy, put out some reports, some data requests were made, and they were responded to. There was some information from town councils, et cetera, about 500 pages. Today, nearly 2 years later, there's about 50,000 pages of information. A slew of expert testimony, an incredible amount of public testimony, not only in the town of Burrillville, but from Woonsocket and Johnston and all throughout Rhode Island. About a year ago, our state rep from the town of Burrillville, a little bit of North Smithfield, came to us and said, what can we do? What can our state reps do? Mr. Fogarty, Senator Fogarty, and Brian Newberry, Representative Brian Newberry, a little bit of Burrillville and mostly North Smithfield, they came to us asking for what they can do. One of the things we asked them to do was to review the Energy Facility Siting Act of 1986. 1986. It's a long time ago. I don't think anybody here, I know you don't, I don't. Matter of fact, I used to have a computer that was built in 1996. That's in the junk heap. So we've gotten rid of.
I got married in 1986. I think my wife at some point would revel in that analogy with me.
Well, let's not go there. That's a different show. That's a different program. So with Speaker Mattiello at the helm, along with Cale Keeble, Art Handy, and Representative Prince, I think his name is, they devised a subcommittee, a committee, a workshop, a study commission on looking at the Energy Facility Siting Act. The premise is to update it, is to look at that 1986 law and bring it up to date. Are there things that in 1986, given their authority, and there were some revisions around 1992, 1993, even up till about 2001, 2002, some revisions, but here we are in 2017, quickly approaching 2018. Are there things we can do as a body, as a collective elected body, both for citizens, industry groups, nonprofits? Can we get together and look at that act and bring it up to date? And that's what the mission is of this study commission, is not only look at the faults, look at the problems associated with what we've been seeing for these last 2 years, a little bit of transparency, incomplete applications, details of data requests that go redacted or not available to the public. Are there things we can do within the act itself, the 1986 act itself, to bring it up to, not only bring it up to date, make it a little more transparent, increase the number of stakeholders in this group. As you mentioned, right now there are 3 people on that board. Margaret Curran, who's the head of the Public Utilities Commission, Parag Agarwal, who's the Associate Director of Statewide Planning, and Janet Coit, who is the Director of the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management. Can we look at that board and decide how to make changes? Our neighbors to the north and west, in Connecticut, there are 9 individuals on that Energy Facility Siting Board. In Massachusetts, there are 9 on that board as well. That board in Massachusetts can actually increase up to 30, depending on the size, the scope, and the severity of the impact of that project.
And let me jump in for a second.
Yeah.
The experience has been with the larger groups, quite frankly, they're a lot more aggressive in, shall we say, both interpreting and making decisions based on the original goal of the legislation, which was to determine the efficacy, the need, the safety, all of the issues that not only in addition to fighting the localized nature of control, but also to give broader credence to the issues underlying the generation and the need for the existence of the plant itself. Those 2 other states have been much more, I'll use my term, intellectually honest in understanding the real intent of the legislation, haven't they?
They have, and we don't have to go too far north to find a stark difference between how Rhode Island treats energy production facilities, infrastructure, whether they be gas or wires or compressor stations or substations. Then if we went to Vermont and New Hampshire, look at one thing and one thing only: the place at which the applicant is going to put this infrastructure. That's their primary consideration. Yes, it does have to do with economic considerations, health and safety issues, and all of the rest. But in terms of their primary goal, where are they going to put this? In Rhode Island, the where comes way down on the list.
Right.
The actual siting and the actual siting of this facility. That comes after the fact. That comes along with job creation. Nothing wrong with jobs, economic development. Nothing wrong with economic development. But all those things are looked at as pieces to the puzzle. Whereas in New Hampshire and Vermont, they look at the puzzle, and the puzzle says, where are you going to put this thing? That's key. That's number 1. So it's a huge difference. So it's those areas, those things, the makeup of the board, the number of stakeholders, the type of public hearings, who is on the board, and if the Energy Facility Siting Board can expand or contract based on the project. And I don't think anybody, matter of fact, I know this for a fact, I don't think anybody would complain too much about putting in, upgrading an electric substation, or upgrading the grid, or upgrading power lines to make them less to make them a little more safer, to make them less visible in some cases. I don't think anybody would complain about that.
Right.
And so at that point, the Energy Facility Siting Board, which has authority over both in terms of distance of the wires and power stations, how much megawatts they produce, I don't think anybody would complain about contracting the Energy Facility Siting Board to 3, 6, or 9 members for a particular project that really has no impact. If anything, it'll have less of an impact. But I think everybody would agree, at least I hope the committee would agree that we would need to expand the Energy Facility Siting Board if there were some major power plant infrastructures like additional pipelines, upgrading all the compressor stations in Rhode Island, adding a power plant in the middle of the woods in northwestern Rhode Island.
Right.
So that's what we're hoping this new study commission would look at. You mentioned about the diversity on the site, on the board itself, the study commission, in terms of who they represent. It's a good mix of labor. It's a good mix of nonprofits, a good mix of state agencies.
Mm-hmm.
We have one a town council member from the town of Burrillville, and I think in this particular case that's a good thing, because that individual, along with the nonprofits and the person who's there who represents the general public, has been steeped into this process for the past 2 years. What's fascinating about everybody on that study commission is that they too have been steeped into this process, this Invenergy project for the last 2 years. So they're going to bring that perspective to the study commission. What we hope, what we think we'll get out of it is a better, more transparent, more diverse commission, a board at the end, an Energy Facility Siting Board, that will be more responsive to the needs and the wishes of the community that these projects will be built in. That's what we hope.
Well, and take something as straightforward as their, let's be blunt, as offensive as their casual dismissal of what was almost a multi-year project, and that was folks from your community traversing the state, informing town councils, and bringing them up to speed. And I can tell you, as someone who brought something before my town council, who were not too accommodating, we haven't forgotten that, managing to get town councils who can't agree on a streetlight, managing to get them to, almost with a degree of unanimity that was very impressive, to oppose this.
Sure.
A more diverse, larger community within that EFSB board is going to have a vastly different look at some of these issues. And to wit, I believe that there's a strong conflict of interest in that all of these people are direct appointees of the governor. That's something, I mean, on a fundamental sharing of powers, there should be someone from the legislative branch. There should be someone from the dreaded private sector. And of course, people, appointed by the governor. But if you've got a governor whose sole vision incorporates one perspective, and the next step is that board is exclusively appointed by the governor, how can it possibly be fair?
So I think this is the right thing to do. So I mentioned earlier about this is worthy of our time and effort. I think everybody on that board agrees that this is worthy of their time and effort to think anew, to see what happened, how that crack that started off 2 years ago actually ended up in a much bigger, wider crack with some issues that need to be addressed. So I think this is a golden opportunity. This is one of those moments, and thanks to Speaker Mattiello and Representative and Chairman Cale Keeble for pushing this through and getting this to a stage now where there'll be public hearings. We've already started to invite certain organizations to come and testify. We're hoping to get more and make them more of a diverse group of folks with many stakeholders. The hearings are public. They're also on TV on the Rhode Island State House Access Channel. So please tune in. There are two that are coming up that I know of real fast, and one is December 8th, and the next one I think is December 13th, I think. But the next one I'm sure about is December 8th. So be sure you tune in and check that out. And, yeah, go ahead.
And I was going to say, because this, as we always say, this isn't just a Burrillville issue. The decisions being made now on how to structure this are going to impact every single Rhode Islander at some point in their life.
And that's key here. When you're looking at that study commission, it may look like it's Burrillville centric, but it's not. This 1986 Act did a lot of good along the way, moving things along, helping to stabilize the energy industry, helping to improve the grid. But now that's many years ago. That's 36 years ago, 26 years ago. You know, it's time for, you do the math, it's a long time ago.
Well, and it's the challenge facing government on virtually every issue, from intellectual property to technology to energy towards ethics. You know, we are in a vastly different world this year than, say, even the world we were in 3 or 4 years ago.
Absolutely.
The notion that a law could be predictive of an environment 30 plus years later, given the advances in technology, the challenges in ethics, the environmental, the economic issues, all of these is, well, nuts. So it's quite frankly, it's time. It's actually past time. It's to me, if there's a tragedy in this, that it took an event like Burrillville to once again prove to Rhode Island government that you need to be proactive, that you need to understand developing events as they occur and not wait for a community to have to be held hostage, my words, by an outside entity intent on doing harm on them for their own personal profit. Did I say it that way? I meant it. It's sad that it had to come to this, that the lives of an entire community could be so profoundly disrupted on such a fundamental level for a government to say, wait a minute, because to me, again, my words, I'll use two examples of this, and this will kind of morph into our, we only got a couple minutes for a quick campaign this conversation.
Oh my.
Times, issues like this, I'll spare people the cliche of the learning moment, but these are leadership moments. You know, I was challenged, I'm blessed, and I mean blessed, to appear on an every once in a while basis on a show called The Lively Experiment. And I was about to ready to go into my anti-corporate subsidy rant with Jim, and he challenged me. But Jim Hummel is a fabulous force in this show. The Lively Experiment is, if there is appointment television watching in this state right now, in addition to me, of course, but it's The Lively Experiment. Anyway, he interrupted me when I started to complain about this. Here we go again with RI for Amazon, big bucks to get across. He said to me, well, what? People would complain if we didn't compete for it. And I said, that may be true, but the teaching moment here, the leadership moment, which was lost and was again failed, was that rather than just offer to write a big check to Amazon, for a governor to take the bully pulpit, use this as an opportunity to discuss why we aren't competitive on a native basis, why it is it good enough just for them to come to Rhode Island, because it's a hell of a place to come. And in the same token, when it became clear 2 years ago that this Energy Facility Siting Board was an archaic structure born out of goodwill, but a structure that had failed to keep pace with changes in technology, the law, the standard of living, the type of manufacturing businesses that we have or no longer have in the state, it failed to come to pace with all of that. That was the time to show leadership and say, okay, let's take a break in the action for a little bit, and let's assess how we're going to go forward with this, rather than, to be blunt, take a couple of checks and say, yeah, okay, this is fine. I'm going to, on one hand, get in front of the Providence Chamber of Commerce and talk about the open door for the folks at Invenergy, while at the same time, turn around without even taking a breath and turn to the environmental community and swear to uphold Kyoto, to swear to engage in wholesale growth in environmentally sound, green energy techniques. So that's the failure here. If it all boils down, as it always does, to leadership at the highest levels of government. You know, if I as a libertarian would, that's why, quite frankly, my personal opinion is that I think people as individuals and as market forces do a better job of governing ourselves than these people ever do. And this is case number one for it. In two separate instances, we've had a failure of leadership at the highest level to assess a situation, look at its profound implications both on a human and a financial level, and use that as a time to address and change the way that we move forward. In both cases, she failed miserably. And I'm sticking to it. So
So,
yeah,
Paul,
I don't
you're
think
running for governor.
I don't.
That's the next segue.
No,
Right?
but I don't think you disagree, would you?
So here's what I agree with. Let's be clear.
Mhm.
Let's be clear. There is a failure of leadership, and probably goes hand in hand with a failure in management.
Mhm.
You can be the worst leader imaginable. If you're a pretty good manager, at least you can move things along.
Right.
You might stumble onto success.
Mhm.
In this case, we're in a state now that there's been both a failure of leadership, the consultants that our current governor is hiring for everything from UHIP to cooler warmer, to even consultants when it comes to energy production here in our state, and that is a central key to my platform. My focus here has been miserable, has been a failure. So yes, it has been a failure of leadership. It's been a failure in management. It's also been, and I've discovered this running around the state, getting as much support as I possibly can for this gubernatorial candidacy that I'm seeking. It's also a failure in connections. Our current governor is not doing a very good job of making the case for the office's successes and failures. And if there's a failure, explaining why there are failures. We recently had a storm here a couple of weeks ago, where in some parts of Rhode Island it was 5 days without electricity. Not one word came out of the governor's office. There was no word about how to cope with this, how to deal with this, what the state was doing to help the citizens of Rhode Island who were both without power and heat, light, everything. Particularly when it comes to internet service. And I know that may sound a little strange. Why internet service? A lot of people in Rhode Island devote their time and energy and make money dependent on their ability to connect with the internet. And when the internet was down for that length of time, I was one of them. I was scrambling to find a place. I had to go to my university, Bryant University, sit in their library. You couldn't go to any library in the state of Rhode Island because all the libraries are connected with the same server. And when when that server went down, all the libraries in Rhode Island, which normally gets hundreds of people to sit there and get connected to the internet to do work, make money, apply for jobs, all of those services were down as well. So there were many of us who were scrambling all over the state. And plus this lack of connection, I thought was really there was an opportunity there,
Right.
and that opportunity was missed. So we're segueing into why I'm running for governor. That's why I'm running for governor, because I think I can make that connection. I think I can look at a list of consultants, especially my 30 years of being in the film industry, and look at a segment in an advertisement to promote the tourist industry in Rhode Island, and see a kid on a skateboard skating around someplace that doesn't even resemble anywhere in Rhode Island. I think I can see that. Also, I don't think I need the $400 haircut. What do you think? How am I doing?
You're doing better than me.
But seriously, it's time for a change, and our current governor has been in this position for 2 years. 2018 will be close to close to 4 years, as well as her term as a treasurer in the state of Rhode Island. It's time for a change. Our current treasurer has pretty much dismantled all of the things that our current governor had put into place when the current governor was treasurer in the state of Rhode Island. He's also, the treasurer has also done something that few treasurers have done in a very long time, and that is bring those monies back to Rhode Island and invest them in Rhode Island. He sees the future, as I do, as an economy, a job creation economy that is built in Rhode Island, not necessarily shipping money outside of the state to get jobs,
Right.
not necessarily going outside of the state to get money from Invenergy's and other places like that, but coming and staying in Rhode Island. We've got such great expertise here. We've got such a wealth of information and a wealth of folks here who know how to run businesses. We're a small business state. They know how to get this economy going. Let's give them the opportunity to make it happen. So yeah, I'm running for governor. I'm still running for governor, and will continue to run for governor up until September 12th in 2018, the
Excellent.
day after the primary. But yeah.
That's
And
it.
how are things going? I knew you were going to ask me that. So how are things going, Paul? They're going very well, I think. We're getting the word out there, getting the message out there as much as possible, trying to meet as many people as possible so we can get the word out. We want to bring our message of a local growth economy, fossil-free future economy, where we use the expertise and talents that are in it, that are in this state to our best benefit. We want to go towards a state that thinks of mitigation more than resiliency. So we're not building seawalls, or we're not building higher and bigger flood control or centers, but we're actually reducing our carbon footprint, incorporating some of the opportunities that other states have when it comes to creating more viable and more sustainable and a futuristic job production center that we can do in Rhode Island.
It's astonishing because here's a state with wonderful people, some of the finest universities on the planet, smack in the middle of two of the hottest growth economies, Boston and New York City, on the planet, with fabulous natural resources, and yet here we are,
And
impoverished.
why
broke.
can't we do that? Why can't we make that leap? We should be able to. Matter of fact, we can. All we have to do is get some political will, stop putting the thumbs on a scale when it comes to places like Invenergy. Forget about the ballpark. It's not going to help anybody in Pawtucket. It's going to give millions of dollars to billionaires, and we should start looking at how to develop better infrastructure, put people to work right here in our state with the money that comes from our state, and get this place rolling again. We can do it. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's a necessary thing to do, and I think I can do it.
What's necessary and good is never easy, but it's I don't know that we have a choice right now.
Don't have a choice.
There really, I don't think we can sink much further, and that's not a reflection on Rhode Islanders. I think that's, in fact, if anything, it's a testament to Rhode Islanders' ability to succeed and survive despite the best efforts of those who would be purport to be their leaders, self-appointed or elected. So our time is now, and it's just a question of whether we just run with it. Well, again, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you, Pat.
Spending your
Thanks.
Friday evening here on the
Yep.
Coalition.
A lot of fun as always.
Paul
Thank you.
Roselli, the titles are starting to get too long. President of the Burrillville Land Trust, a filmmaker, a community leader, community activist, environmentalist, and at the same token, the same time, candidate for the governorship of the great state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. Someone who, as we like to say, in the spirit of the coalition, hashtag takes it very, very, very personally. I want to take a moment, too, to wish the happiest of Thanksgivings to the folks in Burrillville who are listening tonight. As we like to say, we are Burrillville. We are all Burrillville. And the battle that you have fought so nobly continues on unabated, but at the same time, I believe victory is on the horizon, both in your fight against Invenergy, but at the same time, a victory in your fight to represent the very best of what community activism can mean for all of Rhode Island. So, folks, again, thank you very much for joining us. And I know you'll be back on very soon.
Yeah, I will.
Folks, we're going to take a quick break right now. We've got Mr. McGarrett from the Pawtucket Times waiting in the wings, I hope. We're going to talk about one of my favorite issues, but we're also going to talk about media, Pawtucket, some great stuff coming up right now. But we are, in fact, the coalition. Loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network, here at the Go Local Live Broadcasting Center at 90 Way Bossett Street in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of, well, tonight, thousands and thousands of stories because they're all about you. CoalitionRadio.us, Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. We got a new Twitter feed, RI for Amazon. Yes, it's intentionally spelled just like the states, just to confuse them, all right? Because we got all the other social media names. So we're going to start that conversation. We kind of started it this week about the role of government in writing checks to multi-billion-dollar companies to entice them to come here, just like we did on focusing on the Billionaire Baseball Boys Club, what Fenway dream in their attempt to recreate their own little special sandlot here in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, at your expense. Folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back.